The fluorescent lights of Sterling and Coastie always felt like they were judging me. Every polished floor, every gleaming glass wall, every hushed conversation felt like a reminder that I was an outsider, a guest allowed into a world that wasn't designed for people like me. I was Marcus Thorne, a senior financial analyst, at least on paper. In truth, I was an anomaly, a black man in the highest echelons of a company known for its old money, old names, and even older prejudices. I'd spent 2 years meticulously building this facade. 2 years of nodding at subtle microaggressions, of letting condescending remarks about my background or work ethic slide off me like water. 2 years of playing the diligent, quiet professional, always observing, always listening. My true mission, a secret heavier than any balance sheet, was never far from my thoughts. But that day, everything threatened to unravel. It started with a meeting, not just any meeting, but the quarterly executive review, the kind where the air was thick with ambition, ego, and the expensive scent of success. Richard Sterling, the CEO himself, presided. His smile, usually a practiced charm, felt brittle, stretched. I sat at the table, a respectful distance from the power brokers, a pen poised over my pad, ready to take notes. My heart beat its usual steady rhythm, a practiced calm. Then Sterling's gaze, sharp and cold, landed on me. He cleared his throat. The room, already quiet, seemed to hold its breath. "Marcus," he began, his voice surprisingly soft, yet it carried an edge that pierced the silence. "There's a matter we need to address." I knew instantly what was coming. Every fiber of my being tensed. This wasn't a performance review. This was the trap, the culmination of weeks of subtle shifts, whispered rumors, and the growing chill in my interactions with certain colleagues. Sarah Jenkins, the head of investor relations, sat across from me, a smirk playing on her lips. Her eyes held a triumphant malice I hadn't seen before. She hated me for no other reason than my presence challenged her sense of order. Sterling continued, his voice now gaining a theatrical weight. "We've uncovered some irregularities. Confidential company data, sensitive client information. It's been leaked." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a poison gas filling the room. "And our investigation points directly to you, Marcus Thorne." A gasp rippled through the room. Or maybe it was just the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. My jaw tightened. The accusation hung there, raw and brutal. Corporate espionage, the ultimate betrayal, the kind of charge that didn't just end careers, it destroyed lives. My mind flashed back to my mother's tired face, the sacrifices she made, to the endless hours I'd spent in libraries, proving myself twice as good, just to be considered half as worthy, to every time I'd been judged, dismissed, or overlooked because of the color of my skin. This accusation wasn't just about the data. It was about tearing down everything I had built, everything I represented to myself and my family. It was a weaponized lie, designed to destroy a black man in a white world. Corporate espionage? My voice, when I spoke, was steady, betraying none of the earthquake raging inside me. I met Sterling's gaze, unflinching. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Sterling." He leaned forward, his polished facade cracking just enough to reveal the contempt beneath. "Indeed, Marcus, and we have evidence. Log files, timestamps, anomalous activity traced to your network access." He gestured to a junior analyst, a nervous young man named Kevin, who stood next to a large monitor. Kevin clicked a button, and lines of code, IP addresses, and data transfer logs filled the screen. It looked damning. It was all a perfectly orchestrated lie. My colleagues stared, some with shock, some with a cold satisfaction. I saw the relief in their eyes that it wasn't them, and the confirmation of their unspoken biases. Of course, it was the black guy, the one who didn't quite fit, the one who had risen too fast, too far. Sarah Jenkins finally spoke, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Marcus, how could you? After everything Sterling and Co. has given you. My hands, hidden under the table, clenched into fists. Given me? They had given me a front row seat to their corruption, a stage for their prejudice. But I knew exactly what they had been doing, and they had no idea who I truly was. My throat felt dry, but I forced myself to remain calm. My role was to play the accused, the humiliated for now, to let them believe they had won this round. I assure you, I am innocent, I stated, my voice firm, despite the tightening knot in my stomach. I have no knowledge of any such activity. Sterling scoffed. Innocence, Marcus, is a luxury you can no longer afford. We've already contacted our legal team and the authorities. You're being placed on immediate administrative leave. Effective immediately. You are to vacate the premises. The words hit like a physical blow. Expulsion, public disgrace, my name, my reputation, dragged through the mud. This was it, the moment they had been planning. To brand me, a black man, as a thief, a spy, a betrayer. All because I was too close to their truth. As I stood, gathering my things under the watchful, triumphant eyes of my accusers, a lifetime of indignities flashed before me. The times I was followed in stores, the assumptions made about my education, the doors slammed shut simply because of the color of my skin. This was another chapter in that cruel book. But this time, I wasn't just Marcus Thorne, the falsely accused employee. I was something else entirely, and they were about to find out. The silence of the elevator as it descended felt deafening. The weight of the accusation, the sting of humiliation, pressed down on me. But beneath it all, a different sensation began to stir. Cold, hard resolve. They had played their hand. Now, it was time for me to play mine. The game I knew had only just begun, and they had no idea how deeply I was embedded, or how thoroughly I intended to expose them. The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye, cold and calculating, fixed on me. They had spoken the words, sharp and final. Corporate espionage. My name, Michael, now tainted, thrown into the cesspool of accusation. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my face, I prayed, remained a mask of controlled disbelief. This was it, the moment I had been anticipating, dreading, preparing for. The trap had sprung. Mr. Albright, perched at the head of the polished oak table, watched me with a glint in his eye I couldn't quite decipher. Was it triumph? Or was there something else? A flicker of unease beneath his smug facade. He held a thick manila file, its contents a mystery to everyone but him and his inner circle. The file seemed to radiate a cold, manufactured authority. "We have reason to believe, Michael," he began, his voice dripping with false concern, "a theatrical performance, that you've been sharing proprietary information with outside competitors. Highly sensitive data, in fact. The sheer audacity of it left a bitter taste in my mouth, like ashes on my tongue. Proprietary information, the very data I had been entrusted to protect, the secrets I had dedicated months to understanding, securing, and analyzing. They were twisting my diligence, my expertise, into deceit. I looked around the room. Sarah, from HR, usually so approachable, now wore a tight, unreadable line on her face, her eyes avoiding mine. David, from legal, usually jovial, now sat stiffly, his gaze distant, already having rendered a judgment. Only a few faces seemed genuinely shocked, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. The others, the core of Albright's loyalists, were already convinced, their minds poisoned by the narrative he had meticulously crafted, ready to watch me fall. "This is outrageous," I managed, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt deep within my hands, hidden beneath the table, clenched into fists. "I have never, not once, compromised the integrity of Viridian. You know my record. Years of unwavering dedication. My record. Flawless. Years of loyalty, sacrificing weekends, enduring late nights, chasing deadlines, all for this company, all for this moment, it seemed. To be publicly disgraced." Albright merely chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that grated on my ears, scraping against my very soul. "Your record, Michael, is precisely what makes this so baffling. Such a loyal, high-achieving employee. Who would suspect?" He paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. "You were too good to be true. You rose too fast. You must be hiding something." It was the subtle racism, always lurking beneath the surface of their polite corporate smiles, now blossoming into full-blown suspicion. The black man, rising through the ranks, achieving success too quickly, too smoothly. It couldn't possibly be earned through merit alone. There had to be a trick. There had to be an angle. And that angle, in their minds, was betrayal. Later that day, the whispers started. They followed me through the corridors, like shadows, elongating and twisting with each step. They snaked around my cubicle, polluted the once friendly atmosphere of the break room, turning coffee breaks into silent, tense affairs. Emails I'd sent, perfectly innocent requests for data or project updates, were being dissected, their words twisted into cryptic messages. Calls I'd made to legitimate vendors or long-term colleagues suddenly sounded suspicious, their duration scrutinized, their content reinterpreted as illicit communication. My customary lunch with a former mentor, a respected figure in the industry, was now deemed a covert meeting. Every interaction, every benign act, now viewed through the tainted lens of betrayal, fueled by Albright's carefully planted seeds of doubt. The office had become a hostile, alien landscape. My phone vibrated with a message from my partner, Maria. "Everything okay, love?" she asked, her simple words tearing at the fabric of my composure. I stared at the screen, a knot tightening in my stomach, a cold dread washing over me. How could I tell her? How could I articulate the cold wave of contempt washing over me? The feeling of being hunted, cornered, in a place I once called my professional home. How could I explain the sudden, sharp pain of being seen as a criminal solely because of the color of my skin and the convenience of my position? I couldn't burden her with the crushing weight of this just yet, not until I had a clearer path, a definite strategy. I typed back, "Just a tough day. Long meeting. Nothing I can't handle." A lie, but a necessary one. For now, my battle was mine alone. I moved through the office like a ghost, observing. My senses were heightened. Every sound, every glance, every hushed conversation registered. This was my real job, after all, not the data analysis, not the project management they thought I was doing. My mission, given to me by the federal agency, was to expose the deep-seated corruption festering within Viridian Financial. And now I was the target. This accusation, this public humiliation, it wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to neutralize me, to discredit me, to silence me before I could find the definitive proof they needed to bring down their empire of lies. Mr. Albright's actions, his overblown indignation, his convenient evidence, it all fit the pattern I had been tracking for months. The intricate web of shell companies, the shockingly inflated contracts, the sudden, inexplicable disappearance of key financial records from secure servers. My espionage was merely a smokescreen, a convenient diversion. They were trying to frame me, to sacrifice me, to throw me to the wolves, all to divert attention from their own, far more elaborate, devastating, and criminal activities. It was a classic move, and I had anticipated it, though the personal sting of it was sharper than I had prepared for. I remembered the quiet, firm instructions from Agent Miller weeks ago in a nondescript cafe. Blend in, Michael. Become part of the furniture. Be so good at your cover that they forget you're there. And when they finally make their move, when they show their hand, when they start to panic, that's when you act. That's when you bring the truth to light. The time was coming, but not yet. I had to let them build their flimsy case, watch them weave their tangled web of lies, each strand more precarious than the last. Every false accusation against me, every fabricated piece of evidence, was a thread in their own noose, tightening with each step they took. My mind replayed a specific conversation from weeks ago. Albright, pressing me hard about a specific database, asking seemingly innocuous questions about access logs, encryption protocols, and backup procedures. I had brushed it off then, attributing it to his usual micromanaging, his penchant for control. But now it clicked into place with chilling clarity. He wasn't just micromanaging. He was probing, looking for vulnerabilities, trying to understand how I, the one in charge of data security, could be implicated. He was planning this long before the discovery of any supposed breach. He was setting the stage for my downfall, and I, unknowingly, had given him the blueprints. The weight of the injustice settled deep in my bones, a heavy, cold ache. It wasn't just about my job or my professional reputation. It was about the insidious way they saw me, a black man in a position of power, an easy scapegoat, an expendable pawn in their twisted game. The underlying message was clear, etched into their sneering glances and dismissive tones. You don't belong here. You're out of your depth, and we will make sure you fall, no matter what it takes. It was a familiar narrative, one I had spent my life quietly fighting against. But they had underestimated me. They saw a quiet, diligent employee, a man who kept his head down and focused on his work. They didn't see the years of specialized training, the hardened resolve forged in the pursuit of justice, the unyielding commitment to truth that flowed through my veins. They didn't see the badge I carried, metaphorically speaking, the weight of a far greater mission that extended beyond Viridian's corporate walls. I spent the rest of the day in my office, door slightly ajar, listening, watching, absorbing every flicker of movement, every hushed tone. I meticulously documented every interaction, every suspicious email that landed in my inbox, every hushed conversation I overheard, carefully noting who said what and when. The digital paper trail I had been building for months, designed to expose their corruption, was about to intersect with their desperate, sloppy attempts to frame me. My internal log, securely encrypted and accessible only to my agency, grew with each passing hour, a silent testament to the unfolding deceit. The fear was real, a cold knot in my stomach, tightening with each passing minute. The consequences of being exposed, of failing my mission, of being truly disgraced were immense, potentially life-altering. But stronger than the fear was a quiet, burning resolve. I would not let them win. I would not be another black man unjustly crushed by a system designed to keep me down, to deny me my place. I would play their game, let them think they were winning, let them dig their own graves with their lies. And then, when they least expected it, when they were most confident in their victory, I would reveal their truth. I would expose every last one of them. As the office emptied, and the last few colleagues hurried past my half-open door, casting quick, suspicious glances and averting their eyes, I finally allowed myself a deep, shuddering breath. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken accusations, with the weight of impending doom. I closed my laptop, the screen going black, reflecting my own stern, determined face in the dim light. Tomorrow would bring more accusations, more attempts to isolate and break me. But tomorrow would also bring me closer to the evidence I needed, closer to the moment of reckoning. The game had just begun, and I was ready to play, ready to win. They didn't just suspend me, they tried to isolate me, to break me down. My keycard was deactivated, my access to the main servers cut off. But they forgot one thing. The whispers followed me like a shadow, in the cafeteria, in the hallways. Did you hear about David? My phone started ringing less. Friends from work, suddenly too busy, except for a few brave souls. But even their calls felt strained, cautious. At home, the silence was heavier than usual. My wife, bless her heart, tried to be strong, but I saw the worry in her eyes, the questions she didn't ask. I told her it would be okay, a misunderstanding, but even as I said the words, they felt hollow. A lie I had to tell to protect her, to protect this mission. The investigation was a farce, a show. Every meeting with HR felt like an interrogation straight out of a bad movie. Mr. Harrison, head of security, always there. His gaze, cold and knowing, or so he thought. They presented their evidence. Emails I had supposedly sent, files I had allegedly accessed, all of it twisted, manipulated, some of it entirely fabricated. One day, they cornered me with a printout, a transfer request for a substantial sum to an offshore account. My name was on it, or a very convincing forgery of it. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was new. This was escalating beyond mere suspicion. This was an attempt to frame me for something far more serious. I looked at the document. My first instinct was to rage, to scream that it was fake, but I held it back. The agent in me, always present, always watching. Instead, I studied it. The font, the signature, subtle discrepancies, tiny cracks in their carefully constructed lie. Harrison leaned forward. A predatory smile played on his lips. Any explanation for this, Mr. Johnson? Moving company funds to a private offshore account? The audacity, the sheer arrogance, to present this charade, knowing full well I was the one being set up. I took a deep breath. I deny any involvement with this document or any transfer of company funds, I said. My voice was steady, but my insides churned. He scoffed. Of course you do. They all do. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. We have multiple witnesses, David. People who saw you in places you shouldn't have been. On dates, this transaction was initiated. Witnesses? My mind raced. Who would they turn? Who would be desperate enough or loyal enough to the real culprits to lie under oath? The walls were closing in. They weren't just trying to fire me. They were trying to destroy me, to bury me under a mountain of false accusations. But they underestimated me. They underestimated the fire that had been forged in a lifetime of these very moments, of being judged, questioned, doubted simply for existing. Every time I felt the sting of their accusations, I remembered my grandmother's words. They can take your freedom, David, but they can never take your truth if you hold on to it tight enough. My truth was my shield, and my mission, my sword. This was not just about clearing my name. It was about exposing the rot at the core of this corporation, the rot that fed on the trust of people like me. I spent my evenings not wallowing, but working. My suspension meant I couldn't access the main system, but I still had my own channels, my secure network, my hidden trackers, the offshore account. That was a new lead. A dangerous one, designed to pin the biggest crime on me, but also a potential gateway, a thread leading straight to the heart of their operation. I started digging into the specifics of that transfer: the bank, the routing numbers, the dates, cross referencing it with the data I had already meticulously gathered. The pressure was immense. My reputation was in tatters, my career seemingly over. But with every fabricated lie they threw at me, my resolve hardened. I remembered the day I was briefed for this mission, the agency head looking me in the eye. "This won't be easy, David. They'll try to break you, to make you doubt yourself, to make you give up." I wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. Too much was at stake, not just for me, but for every other person who had ever been unfairly targeted, falsely accused, simply because of who they were. One night, hunched over my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark apartment, I found something. A pattern, a series of seemingly innocuous transactions, all linking back to a shell company. A shell company that, on the surface, had no connection to our company. But the timing was too precise. It was a whisper in the data, a ghost in the machine, a faint trail, but a trail nonetheless. And it led directly to one of Mr. Harrison's closest associates, a man named Thomas Thorne, the company's CFO. The plot thickened. They weren't just covering up some embezzlement. They were trying to scapegoat me, a black employee, to divert attention from someone high up, someone who was deeply embedded. I now had a target, a name, Thomas Thorne. But how to expose him when every move I made was being watched, when I was the primary suspect? The answer was simple, yet terrifying. I had to go deeper into the belly of the beast. Even as they tried to chew me up and spit me out, I had to let them think they were winning, for now. The next morning, an official letter arrived, a formal notice of termination, effective immediately, citing gross misconduct and misappropriation of company funds. They wanted me out, silenced, gone. But what they didn't know was that they had just given me something far more valuable than my job. They had given me freedom, the freedom to move, to strike, without the direct scrutiny of their office walls. The game had truly begun, and I was ready to play. The silence of my home became a constant companion, a heavy blanket, stifling. The company had put me on administrative leave, a polite way of saying, "Stay away. We don't want your face here." But the accusations didn't stay within the office walls. They leaked, like poison, slowly seeping into the public consciousness. My name, my reputation, shredded. First, it was a whisper, then an online forum post. Soon, local news outlets picked it up. Senior executive accused of corporate espionage. My face blurred, beside headlines that screamed of betrayal. I saw the looks, the pity, the judgment at the grocery store, at my son's school pickup. Parents who once smiled now averted their eyes, or worse, their glances held a cold, knowing suspicion. My wife, Sarah, tried to shield me. She would turn off the TV when a segment about the scandal came on. She'd pretend not to see the headlines on the newspaper stand. But I knew. She knew. We both felt the chill. "Don't worry, David," she'd say, her voice cracking just a little. "We know the truth." Her belief was a fragile lifeline. My children, thankfully, were too young to fully grasp the venom being spewed. But they noticed the change, the quietness, the way I'd stare blankly at the wall, lost in thought. One evening, my daughter Maya brought me a drawing, a crayon drawing of our family. Everyone smiling, except me. My face was a frown. "Daddy, why are you sad?" she asked, her small voice piercing through my carefully constructed facade. My heart ached. I hugged her tight. It's nothing, sweetheart. Daddy's just thinking. Thinking about the web of lies. Thinking about Marcus Thorne, the man who spearheaded this investigation against me. His smirk, his condescending tone in those interrogation rooms. He truly believed he had me. He thought I was just another expendable black man, easy to scapegoat. He didn't know I was watching him. Every move, every meeting, every hushed conversation I'd subtly recorded, every email I'd flagged. The real players were becoming clearer. The intricate dance of their deception. My administrative leave wasn't a punishment. It was a golden opportunity. The pressure on me was intense, designed to break me, to make me confess to something I hadn't done. But for me, it was a license to operate without immediate scrutiny. My old handler, Agent Miller, had been right. They'll try to isolate you, David. That's when you strike. He'd given me a secure laptop, a burner phone, and access to encrypted channels. While everyone thought I was crumbling under the weight of accusation, I was piecing together the true picture. From the comfort of my own home, unseen, unsuspected, the evidence mounted. I found discrepancies in company accounts, large, unexplained transfers to shell corporations, links to overseas operations that mirrored the very espionage I was accused of. But these were their operations, not mine. I discovered Marcus Thorne's secret meetings with a rival tech firm's CEO, late nights, undocumented. The kind of meetings that spelled collusion. The kind of meetings I was supposedly having. It was a mirror image. They projected their own crimes onto me. A common tactic. Blame the innocent, especially the one perceived as weak or easy to discredit. I felt a surge of cold anger, not hot, impulsive rage, but a deep controlled fury, the kind that fueled a quiet determination. They had gambled on my silence, on my shame. They had gambled wrong. The legal team assigned by the company, predictably, was more concerned with protecting the company's image than my innocence. My lawyer, a slick corporate type named Mr. Henderson, kept pushing for a mutually agreeable resolution. Mr. Jones, he'd said, leaning back in his expensive chair, the optics are bad. A quick settlement, an admission of minor wrongdoing, could make this all go away. Less damage. An admission of minor wrongdoing? I almost laughed. They wanted me to admit to their crimes, to take the fall. Mr. Henderson, I replied, my voice calm, I have done nothing wrong. There will be no admission. He sighed, exasperated, as if my innocence was an inconvenience, as if my refusal to lie was an obstacle to his tidy corporate strategy. Think of your family, Mr. Jones, he said, pulling out the oldest trick in the book. This will drag on. It will be public, messy. He thought he was intimidating me. He thought he was playing on my fears. But all I saw was their desperation. They wanted this contained. They wanted me silenced. I nodded slowly, letting the silence hang. I am thinking of my family, Mr. Henderson. That's exactly why I won't back down. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know the storm I was about to unleash. He just saw a man cornered, defiant, perhaps foolish. But I wasn't cornered. I was gathering strength. I was building my fortress of truth. Each piece of evidence, each damning discovery was a brick. The whispers outside continued. The public humiliation, the constant shadow over my family. It hurt. It truly did. The feeling of being a pariah, unjustly accused, was a heavy burden. But beneath that burden, something else was growing. A quiet power, the power of knowledge, the power of undeniable proof. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had won. But the game had only just begun. And they were about to discover, to their profound regret, that they were playing against a phantom who was very much real and very much armed. The next few days would be critical. I had one more piece of the puzzle to secure, a face-to-face meeting I needed to witness, the grand finale of their deception and the beginning of their end. The summons came early that Monday. Not a gentle request, but an order. The conference room felt colder than usual, the air thick with unspoken threats. Mr. Harrison sat opposite me, his face grim, flanked by two lawyers from corporate counsel I'd never seen before. "David," Harrison began, his voice devoid of its usual forced pleasantry, "we have more questions. Significant questions." One of the lawyers, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, slid a document across the polished table. It was a formal internal investigation report. My name was everywhere. Red flags, inconsistencies, suspicious activity, all fabricated. She spoke with a detached, clinical tone. "Our analysis indicates a pattern of data, access that correlates directly with the compromised project files. Your login credentials were used." I met her gaze, keeping my expression neutral. "I've already explained," I said calmly. "My credentials were stolen. I reported it." Harrison scoffed. "A convenient story, David. One that doesn't quite fit the timeline, nor the specific nature of the data involved." The other lawyer, a stern man with an unyielding posture, leaned forward. "We're talking about proprietary algorithms, Mr. Cole, the very heart of our competitive edge. This isn't a small matter. This is corporate espionage." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. They were escalating. They weren't just trying to fire me anymore. They were building a case, a criminal case. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. The real pressure cooker. They wanted me to crack, to confess to something I didn't do, to validate their preconceived notions about a black man in a high-tech corporate role, to make me disappear quietly. I thought of Mama, her face etched with worry when I told her about the initial accusations. I thought of the countless times I'd had to prove myself, just to be seen as equal. The quiet battles fought every day, just to exist in spaces not designed for me. This wasn't just about my job. It was about my reputation, my freedom, everything. But beneath the fear, a cold determination hardened. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they saw a scared, vulnerable man. They had no idea who they were truly dealing with. I fixed my gaze on Harrison. "I understand the gravity of your accusations," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "And I stand by my statement. I am innocent." The lawyers exchanged a glance. They saw defiance, not fear. It wasn't the reaction they wanted. Later that week, the atmosphere in the office became unbearable. Colleagues avoided my eyes, whispered behind closed doors. Even my usual lunch spot in the break room felt like a stage, with me as the unwilling performer. It was during one of these isolated lunch breaks that I saw it. Mark, one of the project leads, and a known sycophant of upper management, was huddled in a corner office with Robert, the VP of Operations. The same Robert who had been so quick to dismiss my concerns. They were laughing, a loud, boisterous laugh that echoed in the quiet hallway. Mark gestured wildly, a file in his hand, then slapped Robert on the back. The look on their faces wasn't professional collaboration. It was triumph, cruel, smug triumph. A surge of anger, cold and sharp, cut through me. They thought they had won. They thought they were untouchable. I remembered the coded message from my handler just days before. "The net is almost full," confirmed the final thread. I knew what that thread was. A backup server, an old, rarely accessed data vault that stored all project revisions. If the stolen data had been moved internally, a ghost copy would exist there, and it would have a timestamp, a user log, and a physical location. Accessing it would be a monumental risk. The security on that server farm was legendary. But if I could get in, if I could find the original file transfer, it wouldn't just clear my name, it would expose theirs. That night, I stayed late, long after everyone else had left. The office was an eerie maze of silent cubicles and darkened monitors. I moved like a shadow, my footsteps barely audible. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I knew the layout of the server room. I had studied the blueprints, the access points, the camera blind spots. This was a move I had prepared for, but one I prayed I wouldn't have to make. The cool, sterile air of the server farm hit me as I finally gained entry. Rows of blinking lights, the hum of machinery, a labyrinth of data. My target was deep within, on an archived legacy system. My fingers trembled slightly as I worked, bypassing one firewall after another. Each line of code I typed felt like a step deeper into enemy territory. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Then I saw it. The log. A transfer. Not from my account, but from an executive account, to an external encrypted server. And the timestamp. It was recent. It was them. I copied the data, securing the evidence onto a small encrypted drive. As I pulled the drive out, a sudden alarm blared through the silent room. A motion sensor. I triggered it. My breath caught in my throat. I had seconds, just seconds to disappear before security descended. But I had what I came for. The final thread. The air in my small home office was thick with the scent of stale coffee and relentless focus. Weeks had blurred into a single, extended moment of strategic silence. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was a broken man, scrambling to clear my name. But I was the one setting the trap. Every desperate plea, every feigned moment of despair was a thread in the web. I stared at the multi-screen display before me. Encrypted data scrolled across one monitor, cross-referencing financial transactions that vanished into shell corporations. Another screen showed the live feeds from internal office cameras, cameras I had remotely rerouted and encrypted to my secure server months ago. Not for personal use, but for this very moment, this exposure. I watched Sarah's reflection in the glass of her office window. She was on a call, laughing too loudly, her face flushed with a triumph she believed was hers. She had no idea the lens was on her, always on her. The whispers she exchanged with Thorne after hours, the hurried documents she slipped into his briefcase. I had it all, not just captured, but meticulously catalogued. The internal investigation against me was accelerating. Daily emails from HR, demanding more documents, more explanations. Each one I answered with a careful blend of indignation and compliant confusion, just enough to keep them digging, to keep them confident in their false narrative. Each answer was a calculated distraction. They wanted to prove I had leaked the data. They focused on my network access, my email logs, my supposed disgruntled attitude. They were so busy looking for external sabotage, they couldn't see the rot from within. They couldn't see their own greed staring back from the mirror. My handler, Agent Davies, had been clear. Marcus, you have to push them, make them overplay their hand. The more desperate they get to frame you, the more mistakes they'll make. I had taken his words to heart. And they were making mistakes, big ones. Yesterday, I had deliberately forgotten a secure flash drive in a public area of the office. It contained decoy files designed to pique Sarah's interest. A Trojan horse, disguised as my desperate attempt to hide something. Within hours, I watched on my hidden feed as she picked it up. Her eyes darted around. Then she quickly pocketed it, a smirk playing on her lips. She thought she'd found a smoking gun. She had no idea she'd just downloaded a tracking device onto her work. Network. The data streaming in now was explosive. It showed her accessing highly restricted company servers, not from her office, but from a proxy server she thought was untraceable. She was pulling old financial reports, altering figures, then re-uploading them, masking her tracks, she thought. But the digital breadcrumbs led straight back to her and to Thorne. The real fraud wasn't just about stolen intellectual property. It was about manipulating company financials, siphoning off funds through fictitious vendors, inflating project costs, a slow, cancerous drain on the company's future, all disguised as legitimate business losses. And now, my espionage. I felt a surge of cold fury, quickly suppressed. This wasn't about anger. It was about precision, about bringing justice, not just for myself, but for every employee who had been laid off, every investor who had lost trust, every person of color who had been targeted, undervalued, or pushed out. My phone vibrated. A coded message from Davies. Target is making moves. Confirmed readiness. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Confirmed. Full data package prepared. Vulnerabilities exposed. Ready for extraction. The extraction. That was the critical phase. The moment of truth. My heart hammered against my ribs. A primal drumbeat of anticipation. The tension was immense. I was a man suspended over a chasm, held only by a single, carefully crafted rope. I reviewed the compiled evidence one last time. Hundreds of hours of surveillance, thousands of pages of forged documents, audio recordings of Thorne and Sarah discussing their scheme, celebrating their impending escape with millions. Their voices, smug and self-assured, echoed in my headphones. They spoke of me as the easy mark, the useful scapegoat. I closed my eyes for a moment. My mother's face appeared in my mind. Her quiet strength, her unwavering belief in me, even when I told her very little. My wife's tearful face, her fear for our future, her hand gripping mine. This wasn't just for a job or for my reputation. This was for them, for every single one of us who had ever been told we weren't enough, weren't capable, weren't worthy. The clock on my screen ticked past midnight. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, the final board meeting was scheduled. The meeting where Mr. Thorne intended to present his conclusive evidence against me. The meeting where he would cement his position, having removed the threat he created. I knew their schedule. I knew their plans. What they didn't know was that I had already submitted my own report, not to HR, not to their legal team, but to the federal authorities. And they were already inside the building, waiting. I took a deep, steadying breath. The air in the room felt lighter, the burden of secrecy about to be lifted. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. All that remained was to watch the dominoes fall. The next day would not be an interrogation. It would be a revelation, a reckoning. And I, Marcus, the quiet, underestimated black employee, would be the one holding the gavel. I powered down my system, the screens fading to black. The silence of the room was now heavy with expectation, my own expectation. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. They twinkled like distant, watchful eyes. The night was calm, but the dawn would bring a storm. And I was ready. The air in the boardroom was thick with an unspoken verdict. My name, once whispered with professional respect, now felt like a brand of shame. They had called this the final review, a polite term for my public execution. Each step down the polished corridor echoed the past few weeks, weeks of cold shoulders, of averted gazes, of whispers that stopped the moment I entered a room. The insidious creep of doubt they had sowed about me had blossomed into full-blown public contempt. I had watched them, the architects of this false narrative, moving freely, their smiles wider, their power seemingly cemented. It was a strange kind of torment to see injustice flourish so openly, to know the truth, yet be forced to wear the mask of guilt. Every day, another slight, another dismissive glance, another email unreturned. It was 1,000 tiny cuts designed to bleed me dry of dignity. My phone vibrated subtly in my pocket. A single coded message. Ready. My heart, which had been a heavy drumbeat of dread for so long, now pulsed with a different rhythm, a quiet anticipation, a surge of defiant resolve. This was it, the culmination of months of meticulous work, of countless sleepless nights spent dissecting data, cross-referencing files, building a case brick by painstaking brick, of swallowing my pride, day after day, as they chipped away at my reputation. The mental exhaustion was immense, the loneliness of carrying such a secret profound. I remembered the faces of my family, my mother's worry lines, deepening with each news report detailing my supposed transgressions, my sister's fierce loyalty, ready to fight battles I couldn't let her touch, battles that would expose my true identity and endanger the entire operation. Their pain had been my silent fuel, their unwavering faith, my anchor in a sea of professional treachery. I couldn't let them down. I couldn't let this injustice stand. Not for myself, but for every other person who had ever been unfairly judged, unheard, unseen, simply because of who they were or where they came from. I pushed open the heavy oak door. The room was chillingly quiet. Around the long table sat the entire executive committee, like an assembly of unyielding judges. Mr. Harrison, his face a mask of practiced disappointment, already writing my obituary. Miss Evans, her lips thin, eyes sharp, ready to deliver the final blow. And at the head, Mr. Thorne, the CEO, looking down at a stack of papers, his expression a carefully neutral mask. Across from him, the smug faces of Blake and Henderson. They exchanged a quick, triumphant glance, a silent high five for a job well done. My stomach churned, but a cold determination solidified within me. Mr. Davies, Mr. Harrison began, his voice devoid of warmth, formal and detached. Please, take a seat. I walked to the designated chair. It felt less like a seat and more like a witness stand, bathed in the harsh glare of their collective judgment. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. They were letting the atmosphere do their work, trying to break me before a word was spoken, to extract a last-minute confession through sheer intimidation. We have reviewed the findings of the internal investigation, Ms. Evans stated, her voice clipped, professional, devoid of any human empathy. The evidence, Mr. Davies, is overwhelming. She paused, letting the word overwhelming hang in the air like a death sentence. It was meant to crush me. Blake leaned forward slightly, a barely perceptible smirk playing on his lips, hidden just enough to maintain plausible deniability. It's quite clear, really, he chimed in, pretending concern that was paper thin. The patterns, the data breaches, the suspicious activity, it all points in one direction. He gestured vaguely in my direction, as if the very air around me was contaminated. Henderson nodded gravely, his eyes never quite meeting mine. A serious breach of trust, a complete betrayal of the company's integrity and values. He spoke with the conviction of a man who believed his own lies. I met their eyes, Blake's, slick with false sympathy, Henderson's, cold and calculating. They thought they had won. They thought they had buried me under a mountain of fabricated evidence and public scorn. But they hadn't seen the whole picture. They had only seen what I allowed them to see, every piece of misinformation carefully placed, every red herring strategically deployed. Mr. Thorne finally looked up. His gaze was direct, almost paternal, which somehow made it worse. It was the look of a disappointed father, a master manipulator. Marcus, he said, using my first name, a gesture of familiarity that now felt like a condescending pity. We are deeply disappointed. This is not the man we believed you to be, not the man we hired and promoted. His words were a carefully aimed sting. They were meant to conjure guilt, to make me confess, to make me crumble under the weight of their perceived moral superiority. But my conscience was clear. My mission was almost complete. "We've decided unanimously," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice resonating with cold authority, "that your employment with Sterling Corp must be terminated, effective immediately." A cold wave washed over me. Even though I knew this was coming, the pronouncement still hit hard. It was the official end of my cover, the public ruin of my reputation, the tangible proof of their success, however temporary. It felt like a part of me, a part of my professional identity, was being ripped away. Blake cleared his throat, hiding a grin that stretched his lips thin. Henderson shifted in his seat, openly enjoying the moment. A predator watching its prey finally fall. They had orchestrated this. They had manipulated the narrative, weaving a tapestry of lies around me. And now, they were basking in the glow of their perceived victory, their ultimate control. Furthermore, Miss Evans added, her voice sharper, "We will be pursuing all legal avenues to recover the damages incurred, and to ensure that justice is served for such a flagrant act of corporate espionage." She made corporate espionage sound like a personal vendetta, a crime committed out of pure malice, not desperation or a genuine misunderstanding. Their framing was impeccable. Their narrative was flawless. To anyone who didn't know the truth, my mind raced. This was the moment, the very peak of their arrogance, the perfect stage for the truth to be unveiled. I could feel the weight of the small hidden device in my inner jacket pocket, the one that was broadcasting everything, the one that would turn the tables so violently they wouldn't know what hit them. "Do you have anything to say, Mr. Davies?" Mr. Harrison asked, a note of finality, of dismissive closure in his voice. "Any last words before we conclude this unfortunate matter?" He said it with a flourish, like a judge before the gavel falls, eager to move on to the next item on his agenda. I looked around the room. At their faces, a mixture of stern judgment, cold indifference, and outright triumph. They were so sure of themselves, so sure they had dismantled me, so convinced of their own righteousness. A profound calm settled over me, a deep, unshakable calm that came from knowing the true power I held. My voice, when it came, was steady, clear, each word carefully chosen, not for them, but for the invisible audience I was now addressing. "Yes," I said, "I do have something to say." I paused, letting the anticipation build, just for a moment. This wasn't for them. This was for the camera, for the record, for the world that would soon watch. "You're right," I continued, my gaze sweeping across their faces, lingering on Blake and Henderson. "There has been a serious breach of trust, a flagrant act of corporate espionage." Blake and Henderson exchanged another knowing look, a flicker of satisfied vindication in their eyes. They thought I was admitting guilt. They were utterly mistaken. "And you're also right," I added, my voice growing a little stronger, a low rumble of impending thunder, "that justice must be served." I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of the device. The room watched me, curiosity turning to confusion, then to a subtle, growing unease. Blake and Henderson's triumphant smiles faltered. "But you're wrong," I said, a faint, slow smile finally touching my lips, a smile they hadn't seen in months, one filled with a quiet power they couldn't comprehend. You're wrong about who the real betrayers are. You're wrong about who has been under investigation this entire time. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was laced with a sudden, dawning apprehension. Their smugness began to crack, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. I pulled out the small device. It wasn't a phone, it was a sophisticated audio and video recorder, designed for discreet, high quality capture. I held it up, clearly displaying the agency emblem etched onto its casing. My name isn't just Marcus Davies, I stated, my eyes locking with Mr. Thorne's, then moving to Mr. Harrison, Miss Evans, Blake, and Henderson. My voice filled the room, no longer calm, but resonating with the full weight of my true authority. And this isn't just a termination meeting, gentlemen and madam. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with suddenly understood implications. They leaned forward, their expressions shifting from judgment to outright shock. They still didn't grasp the full scope. Not yet. But they would. Soon. Very soon. This is the conclusion of an official operation, I declared, holding the device up for them to see the emblem more clearly, letting its significance sink in. An operation initiated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to expose the systemic fraud and corruption within Sterling Corp. The room erupted in a collective gasp. Blake's face went from pale to ashen. Henderson looked like he was about to vomit. Mr. Harrison looked like he'd seen a ghost. A very angry, very official ghost. My finger hovered over the record button, then pressed it firmly, illuminating a tiny red light. The device emitted a low, distinct click that reverberated through the stunned silence. The game was over. A new, far more serious one was about to begin. And with this, I finished, my voice echoing with the full, undeniable weight of my revelation, my gaze burning into each of them. I believe the real story can finally be told, and justice, true justice, will finally be served. The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched, thick and heavy, suffocating the room. Every eye was on me, their faces, once so smug, now contorted in disbelief. Panic flickered behind the bravado. My identity, carefully constructed, meticulously hidden, was now fully exposed. I was no longer just the accused black employee. I was the agent, the investigator, the one they never saw coming. Mr. Henderson's face, usually a mask of condescending calm, crumpled. His eyes darted, searching for an escape. But there was none. The doors were locked, metaphorically and literally. The truth had its own set of unbreakable chains. You can't be serious, Miss Jenkins stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. Her usual sharp, cutting tone was gone, replaced by pure terror. She looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time, and saw not a target but a force. I had spent months enduring their snide remarks, their dismissive glances, their blatant assumptions about my character, my intellect, my very worth. They had built a narrative of me being a thief, a spy, an outsider, all because of the color of my skin and the perceived threat I posed to their comfortable, corrupt world. But now, their narrative was crumbling, piece by painstaking piece. I held the hammer, and their carefully constructed glass house was shattering around them. The evidence I presented was undeniable. Not just the documents, the emails, the coded messages, but the audio recordings, the video surveillance, their own voices, their own faces, condemning themselves, caught in the act, their whispers of illegal deals, their open contempt for company ethics, their specific instructions to frame me, all laid bare. I watched as the color drained from Mr. Henderson's face when his voice echoed through the room, detailing the shell companies, the inflated invoices, the millions siphoned from the company's future, and then the specific instructions to plant evidence in my office to make sure the black guy takes the fall. My heart, though heavy with the weight of it all, felt a surge of cold satisfaction. Miss Jenkins, who had so gleefully orchestrated my public humiliation, now wept openly. Not tears of remorse, I knew, but tears of self-pity, of a life of privilege about to crash down. The irony was not lost on me. They had judged me, condemned me, based on their prejudice. And now they were being judged by their own actions. The corporate security team, now revealed to be part of the investigative unit, moved in. Calmly, efficiently, they secured the premises, collected the final pieces of evidence, and then the arrests began. Watching them being led away, hands cuffed, was a powerful moment. It wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was about balance, about the scales of justice finally tilting back, the system, for once, working as it should, working for everyone. My colleagues, the ones who had whispered, who had avoided my gaze, who had silently judged me, now looked at me with a mixture of awe and shame. Some offered hesitant apologies. Others simply averted their eyes, unable to meet mine. The truth had exposed not just the criminals, but the silent complicity, the subtle biases, the ease with which they had accepted a false narrative. The CEO, who had initially seemed so quick to believe the worst, approached me, his face etched with a complex mix of relief, regret, and something akin to admiration. He offered a sincere apology for the injustice, for the damage done to my reputation. He spoke of rebuilding trust, of systemic changes, of a new era for the company. It was a start, a necessary one. Later, in the quiet of my own apartment, the adrenaline slowly receded. I sat in the dim light, the city sounds a distant hum. The mission was complete, the perpetrators apprehended, my name cleared, more than cleared, elevated. But the scars remained, the memories of those moments of profound isolation, the sting of being prejudged, the weariness of fighting a battle no one else believed you were fighting. These don't vanish with a legal victory. They become part of you, part of your story. I thought about the young black men and women just starting their careers, the ones who would face similar battles, seen and unseen, the weight of expectation, the burden of proof, the constant need to be twice as good, just to be considered equal. My fight was over, but the larger fight, it continued. The agency offered me a promotion, a new assignment, a chance to continue the work, but from a position of even greater influence. It was tempting. The thrill of justice, the satisfaction of righting wrongs. It called to me. But there was another path, a quieter one, a path of advocacy, of speaking out, of using my experience, my voice, not just to catch the bad guys, but to change the game itself, to prevent the very scenarios I had endured, to mentor, to teach, to inspire. The choice hung in the air, heavy with possibility. My phone vibrated. A message from the chief, asking for my decision. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky with hues of a new day, a new chapter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free to choose my own ending, or rather, my own beginning.